We'll just send the sign-in roster around. You guys can sign that as you go. Hey, tonight, like I mentioned the previous one, we're switching gears a little bit. I think we beat the Dickens out of the moral leader training. This is still important. Don't forget about that. We're going to talk about holistic health fitness, H2F tonight. That's the FM. And has anybody not looked at that yet? I know the NCOs have already done an NCODP on it. Okay, I'll rephrase this. Who has looked at it? Okay, that's better. All right, next slide. So I just wanted to start briefly with, what is holistic fitness? The way we're going to work this tonight is doctrinally, we're going to follow that. We've got a panel expert, and I'll introduce them here in a second. And each one's going to kind of talk about what the Army says and what they think best practices is for their specific domain of holistic fitness. And then we'll have a question and answer period at the end of this where you can offer up questions. If you don't have anything, I have some questions that I'll further expand upon. And then hopefully have some discussion with this group, because the way, you can look up here, multi-domain operations, all soldiers must be ready to fight and win. We're always preparing for the next fight, right? It's kind of hard to envision sitting here in Kosovo in a peace support mission that, someday we could go back and our next fight might be kinetic, right? So you have to be mentally and physically ready for that. And I think a lot of the practices that the Army is trying to get across with holistic fitness are really, they're things that you need to do anyway. The Army's just codifying it and really trying to get us to, indoctrinate some new scientific thought process behind some of the principles of holistic fitness. So, there is a whole program that's, it's a little bit more active duty focused in my opinion right now. So that's one of the things we need to discuss as we have a large population of Guard soldiers here, is how do we, take this and manage it back home. Individually, I look at it this way too. We as leaders need to practice what we preach, right? So in order to train this effectively and do it the right way, you all need to get on board with the holistic health fitness program. Get your own ducks in order in terms of the different readiness domains, and then incorporate that in your soldiers, because you can't really get your formations to follow it if you're not doing it, in my opinion. So. And some of these things are going to be habit driven, in my opinion. When you're talking physical readiness, if you're not doing that now, I'm reading an interesting book right now, or listening to it Audible. It's called Atomic Habit. Has anybody heard that one or listened to it? Okay, yeah, it's a good one. I mean, it talks about just making small at the atomic level changes, and those can make habits form over time, which, and then it talks about gateway habits. And some of this stuff, if you make minor changes, you're going to get into what's called a gateway habit, in my opinion, which will lead itself into making better choices personally for some of these other domains. But yeah, okay, so that's kind of the spiel. Next slide, please. I'm going to go ahead and introduce our experts. So the first one we got is Captain Offit. If you don't know who he is, he's our mental readiness expert tonight. He's got lots of experience to include licensed clinical social worker. He's got a lot of accolades. He's most famously, he participated in the 1984 Olympics in the synchronized swimming team. So if you didn't know that, we got an expert here. Okay, Major Shipley, he's next. He's got a lot of credentials too, and he's a quitter. That's his main thing. So no, he's going off to be like, someday he's going to be the guy that's going to, if you need a significant surgery on your heart, that's going to be our guy, because he does have a lot of educational experience. Medicine residency at Brooke Army Medical. You got all kinds of stuff, but I think it's most interesting the third place in the 2012 strongman competition, right behind the mountain. I mean, that was very impressive. Yeah, that Hafthor Bjornsson or whatever his name is. Yeah, he got third. So physical readiness, we got Captain Johnson. Also a lot of experience, and he's board certified orthopedic clinical specialist. OCS, not Officer Candidate School part. You've probably been around, seen him in action, kind of working musculoskeletal stuff. He also owns a national dog walking business called Johnson's Doggy Pal Service. So if you need your dogs walked, it's a national chain. So thank you. Okay, sleep readiness. Captain Raymond. She's our 66 hotel medical surgical nurse. She's been in the Army for a while. Combat medic, very experienced. She also, interestingly, was the backup singer for the 2002 reunion with Black Sabbath as Ozzy Osbourne's backup, so thank you very much. It's awesome. And last, I think we've heard enough about that guy, but he's our chaplain. He's got a lot of ministry experience. He's been around quite a bit, and he's been doing a lot of work here, but you know, the most interesting thing I think about Chaplain Van Sloten is right before the deployment, he actually changed his name. It was Strasser, but he changed it to Van Sloten because you can't have three major Strassers in the organization. So I appreciate you doing that, Corey. So, all right, okay, I'm a clown. All right, so we're gonna go on next to the real briefer. So yeah, be a good one though. All right, I think we got two.
That works.
Yep.
All right, I don't know how to follow such a funny act, but
Can you guys hear him okay?
can y'all hear me? No, not really. About now. This is gonna be awkward, but I'll try to do it like this. Okay, so like the Colonel said, I'm Captain Offutt, synchronized swimmer, and I'm here to share what 7-22 says about mental readiness. So what does it say about mental readiness? Well, did someone say next slide, please? Can we go back? Go back. There we go. So what does it say about mental readiness? Well, the slide says it's the capacity to adapt in the presence of adversity, okay? But it is that, but it's actually much more than just that. Mental readiness is essential when you're trying to soldier, when you're attempting to soldier under duress. When things get chaotic, when things get hectic, during times of uncertainty, your mental readiness is what's going to get you through. And so let's look at the factors that determine mental readiness. Next slide, please. First factor, character. Character is a soldier's true nature. It's their identity. It's a combination of their values, their conscience, and their morals. Key term here, morals. 7-22 describes character and says it's developed through education, through training, through experience, and most importantly in this venue here, through interaction with leaders. So I want you guys to remember that. When you're interacting with the people that you're developing their character, as well as developing your own. The next factor is behavior. Personal favorite of mine, being a behavioral health expert. Behavior is the outward expression of character. It informs the world about what you do. And notice how it ties back into character. So what you do and what you say tends to reveal your true nature. Next factor is resilience. Big time Army buzzword, that resilience. Ability to cope with adversity. 7-22 says resilience is a key component of unit and soldier readiness. Resilience is what allows a soldier to fight through setbacks and fight through stress and fight through injuries and ultimately complete the mission. Got a Charlie Mike. Resilience also serves us not only in operations, but in everyday life as well. 'Cause I don't know about you guys, but I didn't just start seeing adversity when I came on deployment. You know, when I was at home, when I was just living my best life, things were coming at me as well. I'm sure they did you. The next factor is cognitive skill. Cognitive skill is the ability to integrate knowledge into decisions. And notice I didn't say integrate knee jerks into decision. It's integrate knowledge into decision. According to 722, low levels of cognitive skill lead to poor decisions and to misconduct. And it makes sense. Maybe I'm the only one, but anyone else here, you know, back when they were younger, made some poor decisions? Yeah. A couple hands, or I'm only one? Okay. Back before you reached a certain level of cognitive skill, maybe you made poor decisions? Makes sense. All right, the next factor, social acuity. Social acuity is the awareness of, control over, and the ability to manage interactions with others. Well-developed social acuity improves your ability to interact and to appropriately express your own emotions, which is very important. When you think about it, as leaders, we are interacting daily with peers, with juniors, with superiors, and in those interactions, our character is expressed. So all these factors, they work together holistically to establish a level of mental readiness, and to kind of tie them all together, or to attempt to tie them all together. Well-developed cognitive skill and resilience allows me as a soldier, and you as a soldier, to exhibit the behaviors of a leader with good character, especially during interactions with others, while you're developing that person that you're mentoring, or while you yourself are being developed. Next slide, please. And if I can have someone please read this slide, someone with a loud and proud voice.
Mental readiness is the ability to meet the mental demands of any combat or duty position, adapt successfully in the presence of extreme risk and adversity, accomplish the mission, and continue to fight and win.
Ooh, to fight and win. Actually, that's all I have because I'm been time limited. So I'll turn it over to the next person. But I will say that I do have time for each and every one of you guys. All you got to do is come down to Behavioral Health. We're open Monday to Friday, sometimes Saturday, sometimes Sunday, on demand. Just come down, give me a phone call. I'll take care of you. Cool.
All right, so the field manual says a lot about nutrition, and it gets into some nitty-gritty numbers. So I want to paint in broad strokes to get some good takeaways. So I want you to think of food as something you enjoy, but also you want to treat your body like a Ferrari. You should be putting in premium fuel and not just unleaded. So some of these are just some examples actually from the federal government's dietary guidelines. Those actually exist. I have all of those references if anybody would like to get into those details. The big takeaway here is the need to focus on whole foods. Nutrition is a huge topic, and that's why there's never one specific diet. You hear study after study, what's the best, what's the best? And usually the best components are the ones that include these. You can go ahead and next slide. An ounce of prevention is worth a pound of cure. As a doctor, I have to say this because a lot of what we do on our daily life ends up leading to this. These are cross sections of a heart, and all that dark spot in there is dead muscle tissue from a heart attack. So what was mentioned earlier, a lot of these things need to be done on a daily basis. These need to be habits. Things that you do as simple as taking a shower or brushing your teeth. You should really be thinking about what's put in your body. Poor nutrition leads to things up there, not just heart attack, but obesity, high blood pressure, high cholesterol, diabetes, cancers. It can even affect your bone structure. Go ahead and next slide. So the measurements that we've used for years and years and years are BMI. The Army also takes into account, some of this with the body composition program. It's not 100% accurate by any means, but it's a good starting point. It's the best that we have with the capabilities that are allotted for each individual. Ideally, we could take calipers and measure and calculate everybody's body fat percentage, but we don't have the resources to do that. So Knowing and being aware of this, what your weight to height ratio is, gives you a good idea about what your starting point may be and where you need to go to reach your goals. Next slide. And how exactly do you achieve those goals? So, how many people actually read nutrition labels? Good, excellent. In the past few years, they've actually changed. According to the FDA, they've been modified so that you can see calories more prominently. Serving sizes have also been modified. They're easy to read, and some of them have actually been changed to smaller portion sizes. So if you do have issues and you do want to reach certain goals, starting number one with the nutrition labels is the most important. If you're trying to reach a specific goal, whether that may be losing weight or actually gaining weight in the form of muscle, another really important thing to do is accurately measure what you're eating. The best way to do that is by weight. We as humans are terrible at estimating food volumes. But given this environment, we don't actually have a food scale that we can all take. I mean, you could, I guess, with the DFAC. It look kind of weird, but so there's another good estimator here, and this is actually from a free website called Precision Nutrition that's recommended by the American Academy of Physicians. That actually has a lot of good information on it, and this gives you some estimates for males and females, what type of macronutrients you need per day, and calorie goals. Go ahead, next slide. And then all sorts of other resources. You can actually use some of these to get a rough estimate of your basal metabolic rate and then calculate based on what your goal is, whether you want to lose weight, gain muscle, to safely change your calories and adjust your activity levels. Again, I can make these available if people want links. But the most important thing, I think, as a takeaway is making sure that this becomes a daily occurrence. Like I said, just like brushing your teeth or taking a shower, these are the things that will help you be healthy later in life. Go ahead, next slide. And those are just some of the references.
Thanks for having me, Captain Johnson. Again, thanks for the introduction. So I went ahead and I approached this with one slide. So I could talk for hours and days about physical readiness. It's what I do every day, every hour. I talk to my wife after I go home from the clinic about this because we're both physical therapists. So I wanted you guys to have pretty much everything on one slide. So the definition of physical readiness and leadership are up there for you guys to read. You don't necessarily have to go over that. I think we all know what physical readiness is. So my biggest points are going to be emphasized here. There's a lot of information in the field manual. So most importantly, really what I want to pass along to you guys is the change from PRT to the physical readiness of H2F. And that's really what the Army wants you guys to know, is that it's more individualized and specific. And so that individualism there is really just trying to cater as much as possible to every individual soldier. It's kind of impossible to do, but we can try our best to do that, while also catering to specific goals, mission essential task lists of that particular unit. Is there a question?
No, I just had a thought. I was looking at the programming maybe a little bit. Because a thought just hit me, coming from the National Guard side of things, and promote access to weightlifting equipment. And I think we all have problems with trying to figure out what that looks like for our formations going into the future. It's just one thing that gets me pretty hard.
Just hold the question till the end.
So emphasizing equipment, we'll talk about that for that point. That's great. And so specificity and individualism are keys for FM 7-22. Making sure that in the formations, right, I'll talk about this in training frequency and programming, but trying to make sure that we get in weightlifting ability groups, just like running groups. For specificity, obviously for the ACFT there are certain levels that we have to meet, but also looking deep, doing a deep dive with H2F teams and seeing what that particular unit needs to do, if it's infantry or a cav unit, etc. And also just emphasizing that
as far as what the Army's concerned, they want us to be physically lethal, right? And so in order to do that, we need to be powerful and strong. We don't want to run around the battlefield for 2 miles, right? But maybe sometimes we do have to do that. And so it's really balancing strength, power, and endurance. And that's kind of a challenge to do. And so there's a lot of details, again, in this field manual that I want to point you guys to. I don't want to necessarily talk about them today because we could talk all day and night about that. So really, what I'm trying to emphasize here today, if you guys can remember anything, is that you need to be stronger and more powerful. You don't necessarily need to run further or faster. I want you guys to know strength and power is king. So master the basics of physiology. Know, what am I working out here? So there's different energy systems, and you can read about all of this in the field manual here with phosphagen, glycolytic, and the oxidative systems here. They're lower left-hand corner of the screen there. And so, again, we talked about the challenge is balancing strength, power, and endurance, because we have to hit every single energy system here. And this is why the Army is trying to get really, really good professionals here like Cole over there, Lieutenant Barbie, who know a lot about strength and conditioning and do CrossFit, and they're very experienced in programming. So, and this is a whole team environment. We're bringing in a lot of civilians, strength and conditioning specialists to help us with that. So master the basics. Physiology, you can do a deep dive into this field manual. Programming, so the emphasis with programming, the biggest thing that I want you to leave with here is to, when you do start becoming more strong and powerful, right, make sure that you're doing it gradually. No big jumps. And make sure that we're communicating this to our soldiers. So with my patients, I always tell them, make sure you start with a weight you could do 10 times and do it 5 times. And then progress 5 or 10 pounds every week. Periodization is it's a big word for pretty much saying don't do the same thing over and over and over again. So promote access to weightlifting equipment. The way the active duty does it is we have like a Connex full of weightlifting equipment, and they put those right outside the unit. I know it's a little bit challenging for the guard, but one of the nice parts about not being active duty is you might actually have access to a gym that's not completely crowded at 5:30 in the morning when everyone's doing PT. So training frequency, there's some do's and do nots. So make sure you are not performing the same thing day after day. That's in general, right? There are professional athletes that have worked up to being able to do the same thing over and over again. But again, we're not training professional athletes. We're training novice weightlifters. We're training a lot of people are very novice when they come into the military. A very small percentage actually have experience in this stuff. Make sure we're not doing long marches, ruck marches, or long runs and heavy weightlifting days on consecutive days. So there are some studies that support running less than 16 miles prevents injuries, like per week. And there are some studies that say if you run less than 10, that also increases your risk for injury. So I take that as there's a sweet spot for running, there's a sweet spot for rucking between about 9 or 10 miles and 16 miles. And so for training frequency, if you're going to ruck a long ruck on a Saturday, make sure you take your Friday run out of their equation and replace it. Build in some rest days, some active days, and passive days of rest. That might look like running super, super slow instead of running fast that day. That's an active rest day with some stretching. So a lot of these principles in detail are in the field manual, but my strong recommendation is that you actually go to www.startingstrength.com, and my recommendation for a rotation is 6 days. So 3 days of strength training, 3 days of cardio. And you'll see this if you write this term down, you'll be able to go on Google and look up general physical preparedness. But what that is, that's like basic trainee, right? You're just giving them general aerobic capacity, general strength, general anaerobic capacity. And the good part about that is that from that point on, once you know that you've provided them with that, then you can build on that. You can do sport-specific training, you can do CrossFit. So if you see my recommendations here, it talks about Monday, Wednesday, Friday doing that linear strength progression with the Tuesday, Thursday, Saturday aerobic training, distance running. And you do that for several months, and then you can go to your intermediate programs. A general rule of thumb for intensity, and that's your Cole Barbie over there, is an 80-20 rule. So 80% low moderate most of the time, and then 20% high intensity. And that's per week. So if you're running 10 miles a week, only 2 miles of that should be sprinting or high intensity. And if you were to go above that, then you would potentially increase your risk for an injury. And you can measure your external load through percentage of 1 rep max, or your percentage of your heart rate, or you can measure your internal load, which is how much you feel how heavy it is, with RPE. And all these terms are down here. You guys can look up those. So that summarizes that slide for you guys. Thanks for having me.
All right, I'm going to keep it short and sweet. My name's Dr. Raymond. I'm the nurse at the clinic. My computer did a spinning wheel of death today, so I don't have all the notes to talk to you guys about, so we're going to go through this really quick. Sleep readiness. Can anybody tell me what the recommended amount of time you're supposed to get every night is, according to FM 7-22? So 8 is perfect, so 7 to 9. I know some of these youngins are kind of pushing it with their 2 hours on their Xbox and all the other fun stuff, and we see how they look the next day. Next slide. Okay, so according to the reg, there's a couple of different things. Sleep duration, we talked about the 7 to 9 hours. Sleep timing, so our body has a natural cycle called the circadian rhythm, in which we're supposed to make sure we go to bed at a specific time every night and wake up the same the next day. Whether it be a duty day or a non-duty day, this keeps our body kind of in tune with itself, the healing process, redistributes like your cognitive processes. Whenever we jack this up, go to the beer garden, stay up till 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning, and then try and show up for work at 8 or 10, it just wreaks havoc on our body. Sleep continuity, the concept is, that's why we're talking about the 7 to 9, because it takes about the 4.5, 5 hour mark for our body to be into REM sleep, to actually have that redistribution of our cognitive processes. Our metabolic rates are stabilizing, we're burning the excessive calories, whatever additional stress we're able to release happens more around that time. Sleep environment goes along with sleep continuity, because if we have our iPhones going off in the middle of the night, IPCO, I know there's certain things that we just can't control, but if you have your Facebook, your Messenger, your whatever, TikToks, fun things that are happening with these youngins these days. I say youngins because I've been in the Army for 17 years, so I can say that. Yeah, all of these things that are waking them up. What is that immediate response that people want to do? Reach over, grab it, smiley face, and then try to go back to sleep. Well, that completely destroys everything that you've built up to that point, because it takes a while for your body to release the stress again and get back to normal. So what's a positive sleep environment? Can anybody give me some examples of what you can do to have a relaxing sleep environment? What was that? Yeah, turn off all the lights and noise. So a lot of people, I have a fan thing, like I have the fan on, but it's white noise, and they say that's acceptable. But some people say they fall asleep with music, and it helps them stay asleep, but research actually shows that that's contraindicated, because it's constantly cycling something new, so your brain's kind of anticipating the change in pitch and tone. Also, ambient temperature is a thing. So if it's too hot, Iraq, Afghanistan, or if it's too cold, Cambon, still Kosovo, you have to make sure you find that happy medium with those temperatures inside your room. Otherwise, you can sweat to death, wake up, freeze to death, wake up. And then also, as far as your sleep schedule, we already talked about timeline. Who actually gets 8 hours of sleep in here, in this room, between all your missions and all that fun stuff? You actually get 8 hours of sleep? Nice. Who else? I need to talk to y'all's bosses. So, what are some additional factors that affect our ability to go to sleep on time. What's a big one that I see you guys holding in your hands right now? It sucks. Mission does dictate conditions sometimes, and we can't avoid it. But the leadership acronym for it is like set conditions. So yeah, embrace the suck, mission happens, but let the soldiers have the opportunity to have some downtime. So if you have people working on day shift, separate their sleep areas from the night shift if you can, so that there's not that distribution of noise in between. Also, allow them to nap. Oh, go ahead, sorry.
What happens if you live next to a guy that screams and tells him
That's when you kick his bunk and tell him to shut up. All right, the lead by example. So I saw a few people said they do get their 8 hours of sleep. Making sure you're forcing yourself to do it. Set your time. What's a goal? Is a goal something that's just in your head or something you write down and you execute? So making sure you write down your sleep time. You're going to bed at 10, you're waking up at 4 or 5, depending on people's PT schedule. Also, educate and encourage. So we can do the right thing all day, but unless we're pushing it down to our soldiers and reinforcing it, my favorite saying was, they will do what you inspect, not what you expect. It's something I learned a long time ago. So making sure soldiers are off of their phones in their bays, or if we're in tents. Hopefully we don't have to do that on the way back from the deployment, but that was suck. And encourage. So if you see that your soldiers are showing up to work the next day, they got those bags under their eyes, the dark circles, they just look like they're dragging, you know what? Start talking to them about what they're doing. Obviously there might be some additional things like family problems they're having, because I've had to stay up a few hours late to talk to my kiddos and stuff. That's something worth sacrificing some sleep. But if it's a repeated thing and it's starting to affect their performance, then let's talk to them about it. Prioritize and plan. On the next slide there'll be an actual website you guys can go to as leaders to work with your work rest cycles to make sure we're being conscious of like mission creep into things like sleep. Watching people's cognitive processes decline because we're not considering giving them the right amount of sleep or time to take naps during the day. Next slide. All right, so this just goes back over maximizing the mission sleep. So 2 weeks prior to a mission or deployment, get 8 or more hours of sleep per night. Stop the caffeine and alcohol consumption at least 6 hours. Some people it still affects for long periods of time. So your body, listen to it, cut back further. Duration, taking naps. I know 10 years ago when I was enlisted, this would have been a joke. We would have just been kicked anytime this happened, but we have to be conscious of mission. Caffeine can be used to reduce grogginess on awakening, so a little bit of coffee here and there, but not 3 bangs or 3 monsters back to back like I've seen a few times around here. After, to reduce sleep debt or deprivation, plan on any additional sleep time and increase sleep to 8 hours every 24 hours to return to optimal alert and performance. So the sacrifice of this is if you don't get the right amount of sleep, your cognitive abilities decline, your reactive time declines. So we're talking about being able, if something happens, be able to fire back, being able to react whenever you're just driving on these icy roads in Kosovo. So all the basic cognitive abilities decline if we don't sleep appropriately. And then this is the sleep planning aid for missions. It's actually in the regulation, so that's awesome. Next. Sweet. And that leads up to spiritual readiness.
All right, last domain for holistic health and fitness, spiritual readiness. So here's the definition of spiritual readiness from FM 7-22. The development of the personal qualities needed to sustain a person in times of stress, hardship, and tragedy. These qualities come from religious, philosophical, or human values and form the basis for character, disposition, decision-making, and integrity. I like this definition. It works for me. I would add to it, in that first sentence,
personal qualities needed to sustain a person in times of stress, hardship, tragedy, and I would add also to sustain a person in times of ease, success, and joy or blessing. Spirituality is not just for the hard times, the difficult times. From my perspective, it's for all times and for all of life. Next slide, please. Okay, so the FM distinguishes between, and I agree with this, I think it's helpful, distinguishes between general spiritual readiness practices on the left and religious spiritual practices on the right. The terms spirituality and religion are similar, they're related, but I think they're nuanced and also maybe slightly different as well. And just from my own perspective, I would say that these general spiritual readiness practices are those that are not necessarily, could be, but not necessarily connected to a formal religion. And there's value in these. And some of you know this to be true. The last couple slides, I just want a couple significant quotes. Next slide, please. From not too many months ago, the Department of Defense, in this instruction 1300.17, reaffirmed and reiterated the Department of Defense's commitment to constitutional religious freedom and religious accommodation for everyone. And then these are really important quotes that I am committed to as well. The first one, pursuant to the Free Exercise Clause of the First Amendment to the United States Constitution, service members have the right to observe the tenets of their religion or to observe no religion at all. Anybody want to venture a guess as to how many choices you have as a service member, as a soldier? Anybody want to venture a guess? How many choices do you have in terms of your religious preference? What's on what you can put on your dog tags or what you can identify as? Anybody venture a guess? How many choices do you have?
50.
50?
201.
You're getting real close there, sir. So in 2017, the DoD more than doubled the list of what used to be called religious preferences. Now they call them faith and belief codes. The list went from 100 to now 216 choices. And of particular note, one of the choices that's common among soldiers, or has been, is technically no longer a choice. And that choice is no religious preference. You can no longer declare no religious preference. You can declare no preference. You can declare no religion. You can declare none. And just a few other, and some of these are new. You can identify as heathen, pagan, and a whole variety. Sir, I did confirm you cannot officially identify as Jedi yet, but some of you do perhaps, and that is to be respected as well. Some of you do perhaps. But you have a lot of choices, you have a lot of options, and I say that just to remind you that through your S1 shop, you can change. You can change your religious identification and affiliation. And let's face it, most of us, or at least many of us, do change our religious identity or affiliation over time. But you have the right to observe the tenets of your religion or to observe no religion at all. And then that leads to this next and last quote, and this is important as well. DoD components will accommodate individual expressions of sincerely held beliefs, which do not have an adverse impact on military readiness, unit cohesion, good order and discipline, or health and safety. A service member's expression of such beliefs may not be used as the basis of any adverse personnel action, discrimination, or denial of promotion, schooling, training, or assignment. You are free to practice your religion, but there are limits there are limits to that and restrictions to that, in that your practice of religion ought not have an impact on military readiness, unit cohesion, good order and discipline, health and safety, and so on. So while you are free to practice the tenets of your religion, there are limitations to that. You're not free to do whatever you want, whenever you want. And I think hopefully that makes good sense to you as well. I just want to conclude a couple things. In recent decades, there have been numerous reliable scientific studies that have validated that spirituality and/or religion and spiritual and religious practices most definitely contribute to overall health and fitness and wellness. Numerous scientific studies, and not from a biased religious perspective, but scientific studies that show that people who are spiritual, religious, and practice spirituality and religious practices are generally overall more healthy, well, and fit. I'm a Protestant Christian chaplain from a unique Protestant denomination within the Protestant Christian faith. But as a chaplain, I aim to and I am obligated to either perform religious support or provide religious support for all soldiers. And that's for each one of you as well. I have my own unique faith, and I'm obligated to practice according to that. But if you have religious accommodation wants or needs or desires, please approach me with those. If I can possibly help to accommodate those wants, those needs, those desires, I really want to do that for you. Sometimes that may be challenging, may be difficult, but please, if you have religious accommodation needs or desires, please approach me with those, and I will do everything and anything I possibly can to meet those. As a Christian chaplain, I did bring one resource with me, and this fits with this domain. It's called Spiritually Fit, Ready to Serve. And I've got a bunch of these little booklets. It's pretty good stuff, and under 100 pages. If you want one, you can grab one from me tonight or stop by my office anytime. Thank you.
All right, thanks. What I'm going to do is shut this off, and then if you guys would just come up and sit up front there. So the main takeaway here is that, you know, if you are a Jedi, unfortunately, the Star Trek portion of that, you can't. That's a joke. Sorry, maybe you're not paying attention. Yeah, we all know that Jedis are Star Wars, but not all of us. A lot of the readiness domains, but my number one domain is sleep. That is the number one problem for me. And I can tell you that if I don't get the sleep, I don't make the right physical readiness choices, I don't make the right diet choices, my mental state and cognitive skills are not where they need to be, and then I don't want to practice some of the spiritual things as well, because my brain just is off. So I think sleep is the most important one out of the crew. I mean, you guys could prove me wrong, all right? But that's my so what, you know, and I think getting into habits and figuring out what routine works best for you is really the key. But you have folks up here that can help you figure out a plan, you know, and maybe even talk to you about how you can get your unit here. Because here, you should fix this stuff. Who's working missions so difficult right now that you can't get enough sleep, you can't exercise, you can't eat right? Here's the place you build the habits. It's here in Kosovo. Build these habits now, take them back home later. Okay, you got to get it right here. All right, so I'm going to open it up to questions. Does anybody want to? Well, actually, I'm going to start with my first question, and then I'll let you guys kind of go. Okay, Okay, I've got one here. The Army seems to frown on fasting, intermittent fasting. It's something I personally do. Is there science and nutrition tied to the timing of food intake? And what's your guys' opinion? Who's got an opinion on that? All right. I'm going to give you both because we're recording.
So as far as fasting is concerned, there are certain
times when it should be used, particularly if your goal is weight loss. So I wouldn't focus so much on the absolute time in fasting, but when you're fasting. So, for example, if you're wanting to lose weight, exercising, doing cardiovascular aerobic fitness in a fasted state, you're going to be able to burn more calories, and you're going to be able to reach your goal quicker. As far as fasting for like 8 hours during this time of the day and then only eating at this time, I don't know that there's enough research, and there's so much variability, genetic and otherwise, from individual to individual, that you can't prescriptively say this works for everybody. So I think for the point of fasting, it's really in specific circumstances. That one being, for weight loss goals. And when you're doing it, I would do it slowly. I wouldn't start immediately trying to bike, 25 miles on an empty stomach. That would be dangerous. So work about it going slowly. If you have like a stationary bike, do like 1 mile waking up one morning, and then slowly build up over time.
Any questions? Otherwise, I'll go down my list.
What is the optimum temperature for sleep? Or range of temperatures?
So they say room temperature, sir, between like 64 to 68 is the recommended, but it goes by your body. As to some people sweat excessively when they're sleeping, so they'll need to drop the temperature to fit what keeps them comfortable, but usually it's 64 to 68.
So what I heard is, can I describe social acuity and how it factors into mental readiness? Social acuity, everybody okay with doing that? I've already been. I've had COVID, and I've got antibodies, so, I'm fairly safe, I think. Social acuity, so let's see how we break this down. How you interact with people, right? Like I said, you're going to interact with peers, superiors, juniors, people you're mentoring, people who are mentoring you. How you interact with them basically becomes your behavior, the things you say, things you do. 722 says that mental readiness is a holistic conglomeration of character, behavior, resilience, social acuity. There's one more in there. And so how you interact with people is very important, because you're going to interact when things are calm, and you interact when shit hits the fan. And if you've got some character about you, if you've got a bit of resilience, if you are in the habit of using your cognitive skill when you're making those interactions, then you're gonna fare it. It's real easy to, when the heat gets turned up, it's real easy to just kind of fly off the handle and say anything without even thinking about it, right? So, and then what's that going to do? If interactions are our relationships, then what you say and do, you're either building a relationship or you're tearing it down. So, if that's what life is about, relationships, which I believe it is, then what are you doing in those relationships daily? Does that answer?
To paraphrase, if you're a dick, you're going to get, people are not going to feel comfortable, and you're going to get reciprocated that way. So be nice. Be nice to people, respectfully.
Captain Hernandez to answer your question as well.
I mean, not like that, Dick.
So,
Get his name stick.
also social acuity, like Captain Off was talking about, knowing your body language as well. Because you can verbalize to your soldiers or superiors that you care about a certain task, but they'll be able to tell if you don't care about a certain task, depending on how you're sitting, if you're withdrawn, things like that. And whenever we're talking about crucial conversations, we're talking about like people's family members or people are feeling depressed, things like that, being conscious of how you are presenting. If you're mirroring them, if your tone is correct, so that kind of brings it all together.
I don't think that's it. So I'm intrigued in the sleep piece of it because, you know, as I was younger, if I had 5 to 6 hours sleep, I could rock and roll, no problem. As I'm getting somewhat older, I'm noticing that if I don't get 7 to 9 hours of sleep, that I'm affected more by it. Is it biological, or is that for younger generations as well as older generations for the sleep piece? Thoughts?
So, as we get older, the truth is our cognitive abilities decline, our ability to react faster to things, to make conclusions, they start declining. Obviously not while we're in Army age, I would hope, but whenever it comes to needing 7 to 9 hours, it's also has to do with diet. It also has to do with the physical readiness portion of it, because if you're not eating well, you're not going to sleep well. If you're not eating the right stuff, you're going to have mental decline. If you're not sleeping, you're going to have mental decline. If you're not working out, then you're not pushing your body enough to do the reconstructive process while you're sleeping. So it's all kind of intertangled. Does that make sense?
Yes, ma'am.
Do you want to add?
As we age as well, the phases of our sleep change. So you spend more time in the shorter waves of sleep versus the long waves of sleep, where you get more of your restorative rest. So it's really important to counteract for that. So sleeping more, trying to get closer to those 8 or 9 hours versus those 5 or 6 that you could pull off when you were younger, just because our rest is typically less restorative. And that's just a biological fact, unfortunately. But we can do a lot to try to mitigate that, mainly all those other TLC sort of things, basic sleep hygiene, turning off the TV, turning off the screens, simple things like getting up in the middle of the night. If you need a light, use a red light. Don't expose yourself to blue light. Blue light resets the pineal gland and it affects melatonin. So if you need a night light, make sure it's a red light. So little things like that can hopefully help.
Captain Oppert, do you want to add to?
Actually, all I was going to do is confirm that, yeah, as you get older, you need more sleep.
Questions? Okay, there's one question, and I'm going to steal Cap Matson's and kind of expand on it. To me, it seems like holistic fitness centers on the active duty due to the requirements of equipment, manning structure, and availability, because I know at the brigade combat team level, they're going to have a manning structure, physical readiness activities. How can the Guard leadership enforce or ensure soldiers are doing the right thing? Maybe this is a question for the group. You know, to me, a lot of this seems individual focused, but we as leaders have to maintain readiness for the organization. So how do we crack that nut?
So I can speak from a behavioral health perspective. When I came out of the quarantine for COVID-19, I got back in the gym, and there was a gentleman in this room, I won't point him out, but one thing you can do as far as a behavioral health perspective to stop the stigma about coming to behavioral health is, first of all, understand what the word stigma is. It talks about the attitude towards behavioral health and towards behavioral health engagement. And so I was in the gym, first day out, first day back in the gym, and individual goes, hey, you're that behavioral health guy. And I was like, yeah, it's me. Do you need to talk to me? And the response was like, oh, me? No, not me, no way. So what's his attitude about behavioral health engagement? And what is he demonstrating, like Captain Raymond said, what is he demonstrating? Like, what if one of the people that he's leading, what if they saw him respond like that about behavioral health? They're going to think twice about coming to talk to this guy. And I'll tell you, I challenge anybody in there, I'm probably the most approachable guy in there. I'm pretty sure about that. You know, you can approach me and talk to me about anything. Nobody's going to know about it but me. And a select few of my little gossip buddies, that's about it. But yeah, changing your behaviors when it comes to things like that, and when people may be watching you, your response to very hot topics in the Army right now, by the way, behavioral health engagement and getting rid of that stigma.
I think just in general, making sure that we write it down on paper, like SOPs, op boards, things when it comes down the line, down to that, making sure that it gets down in writing so that our guys know what to do and we can reference it is a big start. The field manual talks about an application coming up to where you can track your soldiers' workouts and stuff like that. So that's going to come soon, hopefully. But until then, there are a lot of fitness applications out there that you can create a username and track workouts that way. So that would be one solution right now.
That was actually one of the things I was going to mention. Apps. Who's using some kind of fitness app? Raise your hand. All right, put them down. Who's using some kind of sleep app? Okay, sleep app. All right, who's using some kind of meditation or breathing app? Okay, who's participating in something called transcendental meditation or breathing techniques? How does that affect your spirit and your mental ratings? How does that affect your blood pressure? Yeah. So there's tools out there, that's the point. So not to lead into like, oh, we can't do this because we're going to go home and we're in the guard and I don't have equipment. Yeah, you do. You got plenty of equipment. You can do body weight stuff. You can come up with programs. Write it down. I mean, goals, all that stuff needs to be written down and placed on paper. Plus, part of what we're doing here is talking about it. We're going to address our individual weaknesses here. If you want to lose weight, you want to get in shape, you want to get better sleep, reduce caffeine consumption, diet better, I think this is the place to do it. Take that back with you and build your support network back home. I'm just going to kind of wrap this up because we're at 19:30, but I do appreciate the panel coming in, and like I said, these are the experts, and I personally have gone through, I've been through behavioral health myself personally, so I mean, I support that. I think diet, that's something I think everybody needs to work on. Physical training, I mean, if you're not doing it, then why are you in the Army? The Army requires you to do physical training. There's a test for it. Sleep is something, as I've gotten older, I've learned more about. And, spiritual readiness is something that, I've kind of re-engaged since I've been here. So I think the opportunities are here, so take advantage of them. Any questions or inputs?
Just really quickly, when I started digging into the 7-22 a few months ago, the one thing that struck me, and my own view on it has adapted over the last couple of months as well, is the individualization of health and fitness. And whether you're active duty, guard, reserve, doesn't really matter. It's on us as leaders to help our soldiers individualize something for them to make them better. Now it goes against everything, as an, older soldier. Everything we used to do was team oriented, and you did the same thing as your whole platoon, right? Those days are over. We've gotten smarter with overall fitness to understand that everybody has to have something different to maximize their lethality. And that's what the whole thing is about, right? Maximize the lethality of every soldier. So we as leaders have to take the time, individualize plans for our soldiers through all the domains of holistic health and fitness so that we can make more lethal, soldiers for the brigade combat team or wherever you belong going into the future. So, sir.
Okay, good evening. Who feels like you got a lot smarter tonight? Okay? Who feels like they don't already know enough to pretty much get by with this material? Now, not all of us know as much as these 5 experts. I will agree with that. But I also think everyone in this room already knows enough to do what you need to do in this area. And really what it comes down to is the ingredient that sits like the star over these 5 is personal discipline. Anybody disagree with that? Every single area takes personal discipline to stay focused and do the right thing in all these 5 areas. They all tie together, they're all interrelated. And who's a Jocko fan? Yeah? Discipline equals freedom. Read Jocko, you'll find out what that means. I'm dropping the mic.
All right, that concludes tonight. The next topic's going to be civil discourse, and it's going to get interesting.